Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and today we'll be looking at BfA 5-man healer comparison. In this video we'll go over each healer, we'll go over the benefits, the disadvantages that they all possess in terms of Mythic plus dungeons. Of course, this is a pure speculation video because Mythic plus dungeons are not out in BfA Beta yet, so everything here is speculation. Everything here is kind of taking into Legion perspective and Legion healer requirements. So you have to consider that. Also my experiences in Heroic and Mythic dungeons in the beta as well. But the fact is that we don't know that much about Mythic Plus in BfA. The only thing we know that right now is that Tyrannical and Fortified are planning to move that to level 2 affixes. That means that a level 10 dungeon you'll get a third affix, and there's going to be a new category that they want to introduce, which is going to be Curse, which is going to add a benefit and detriment. And that is the only thing that we know right now, so we're not sure how the keys are going to progress. But at the moment, we'll be taking some assumptions from Legion as well. Besides that, we also saw a nerf to tank threat, and that could be a consideration when thinking about healers and when thinking about the healer output that they need to produce, because a lot of the dungeons or a lot of the high keys in Legion were basically cheesed by the tank kiting everything. The tank will basically pick up as many mobs as possible, will run to the other end of the dungeon, and the mobs will follow the tank. They won't cast any of their abilities, which meant that a healer could go DPS, and basically no healing was required. Now, the tank threat nerf could mean that kiting no longer is going to be possible, so that means that possibly you will have to deal with all of the trash mechanics, which might mean more healing. So you have to kind of consider that as well. But like I mentioned before, we'll be taking some of the assumptions from Legion. So in Legion, for the best healer, or for a healer to be considered best in 5-man dungeons, they would have to have good healing output. Besides good healing output, they will also have to provide good DPS. And now this is where a lot of people disagree. They don't like that. But the fact is that the reason you saw Resto Druids and Holy Paladins in MDI and things like that is that they provide good DPS when needed. So if you want to play, this ranking is mainly for people who will want to push those Mythic Plus keys. So in order to push Mythic Plus keys, really high ones, you will need to do DPS in Legion, and it's looking like that in BfA. Now, to what extent that DPS is going to be needed, I'm not completely sure yet, but I can almost guarantee you will have to DPS at least a little bit. We'll have to see how it all turns out in the future. But keep that in mind. If you don't want to push high keys, if you don't want to DPS, then you don't really need to play the best healer class for 5-mans. Keep that in mind, guys. Besides that, a healer would need to have strong personal and external cooldowns. And that would come in mind mainly for like really high tyrannical keys, where basically a boss would do like party-wide AoE, which would one-shot everyone every 20 seconds or so. And those bosses really do exist. And all of a sudden the healer would need to have strong personals, strong external cooldowns that they can use on their DPS members, or like things like immunity trinkets. They were a real big strategy in Legion, and it could be the same in BfA. We have to see how much damage high tyrannical keys will do. Besides that, you also have to have some class utility, interrupt, slows and stuns, etc. So let's look at Holy Paladins. Holy Paladins were considered very strong in Legion, and in BfA there is not that many changes happening to Holy Paladins besides the HP nerf. So Paladins used to have Righteousness, your maximum health increased by 15%, which meant that Holy Paladins in Legion had the most HP out of any healing class outside of a Resto Druid in bear form. But this is completely gone, so all of a sudden you don't have that 15% HP, so your survivability is lowered. To the same extent, the Resto Druid bear form and Frenzy region has also been lowered. So these two changes is almost like Blizzard saying, hey, we saw Resto Druids, we saw Holy Paladins in MDI, we want to kind of balance everything out in terms of survivability, and this is their attempt at doing that. Which can also mean that they're trying to balance 5-man healers. So it's possible that you might see more or a different variety of 5-man healers in Mythic Plus, or at least high Mythic Plus dungeons. So let's look at the other personal cooldowns that Holy Paladins have. So they have Divine Protection, 1 minute cooldown, damage reduction, perfect, great. Short cooldown, decent ability, it works perfectly. You also have Divine Shield or Bubble, every 5 minutes, unless you spec into a Breakable Spirit, which can be extremely strong for certain situations where you need that immunities. You also have Blessing of Sacrifice, which can be applied to a tank or any DPS that reduces damage taken by 30%. You cannot be used on yourself, so you have to keep that in mind. And also all of those neat blessing spells, which can be situationally extremely strong. When talking about Holy Paladins in BfA, you also have to consider that it's now possible to actually equip a shield as a Holy Paladin, and when equipping a shield, you will generate block. You'll get an additional block chance. Very recently, Blizzard has made a post that they're thinking about increasing or making block a more attractive option. So we'll have to watch this space and see how this change is going to affect Holy Paladin survivability when using or when having a shield equipped in Mythic Plus dungeons. So while Paladins didn't receive that many changes, beside the fact that Holy Shock became more RNG, instead of doubling your crit, now he only adds 25% crit, which means that it's going to be most likely impossible to reach that crit cap for Holy Shock, which means that Infusion of Light procs are going to be more rare, and you can't really rely on Infusion of Light. But the fact is that Beacon of Virtue is still a thing for Holy Paladins, and Beacon of Virtue is basically fits into the definition of Mythic Plus ability. If you use it properly, you can basically create amazing burst healing for the whole party. It has a relatively short cooldown. It's just an amazing ability for 5-mans, and as long as Holy Paladins have Beacon of Virtue, as long as Holy Paladins are able to use Beacon of Virtue effectively with cooldowns and things like that, Beacon of Virtue will make Holy Paladins a strong healer in Mythic Plus. The fact is that you still have those blessing utilities, you still have decent survivability, you still have Beacon of Virtue. Paladins are still looking strong for BfA. Now, let's look at Restoration Druids. And Restoration Druids, again, were one of those healers who were extremely strong in Legion. So, again, Resto Druids didn't receive that many changes. I mentioned before, Bear Form and Frenzy Regen was nerfed. Bear Form right now grants 25% increased stamina instead of 55, which is a huge nerf. But it also adds 220 armor, so a little bit benefit towards the armor. And Frenzy Regen no longer... What Frenzy Regen does right now is that it heals you for 25% of your max health over 5 seconds. In Legion, basically, if you got hit by an ability or there's some kind of a drain ability on you, you could just Frenzy Regen that and just basically go to full in a couple of seconds, which was insanely overpowered. The fact is that the Bear Form / Frenzy Regen combo can be comparable to Desperate Prayer, to what Priests have, and that's on 1.5 minute cooldown. So Bear Form and Frenzy Regen is still a strong cooldown when you compare it to all the other healers. And that's not the only cooldown that Druids have. They also have Barskin, 1 minute cooldown. Iron Bark, which has been moved to 1 minute, which reduces damage taken by 20%, which means that basically on every second Trash Pull, you will be able to use an external cooldown on anyone that needs it. It feels extremely strong in terms of providing survivability for your party members. Really strong. Some of the negatives is that Abundance has been nerfed. Like right now, we reduce the mana cost of Regrowth, which is not really needed in 5-man dungeons. It is harder to reach that 100% crit cap on Regrowth because Regrowth base crit has been removed. So all of a sudden, Regrowths won't crit as much. And also the fact that tier 100 feels very punishing in terms of which talent am I going to miss out on. And it's really hard to choose which one you're going to go with for a specific dungeon. If I don't pick Flourish, I won't have that many cooldowns available to me while doing a 5-man dungeon. So you have to consider that as well. But overall, I would say arguably Druids still have one of the best survivability in raids in terms of Bear Form, in terms of Iron Bark is extremely strong as well. I feel that shorter cooldowns are a bit more effective because especially if there's damage coming on shorter intervals rather than extremely good but extremely long cooldowns like Guardian Spirit and Pain Suppression, which have been moved from 4 minutes to 3 minutes in BfA. It still feels a little bit too long, but we have to see what the damage patterns in Mythic Plus dungeons is going to be like, especially in high keys. So overall, I feel the Druids are still looking very good. Good survivability, strong and short external and personal cooldowns, as well as strong healing on the move. So Resto Druids in my eyes are looking like a very good 5-man healer. So now let's look at Discipline Priest. And Discipline Priest is one of the healers that have changed a lot in BfA. So all of a sudden, please remove. Not a lot of people are sad about that. Power Shield, its cooldown has been completely removed, so Power Shield is a legitimate way of applying atonements and also providing effective health to your party members, which means it can provide extra survivability when someone's about to get one shot, especially when coupled with Rapture, which makes shield so much more potent, and therefore, and it's also 1.5 minute cooldown. So it almost becomes like, like a raid-wide damage absorption for the whole party, which can definitely prevent those one-shot mechanics happening if they're going to happen in Mythic Plus dungeons, unlike Tyrannical Keys. So overall, even though Desperate Prayer for Discipline Priest is not extremely strong, Discipline Priest can still provide that effective healing through shields. And besides that, you also have to consider that Light's Wrath loss is kind of considerable. It's considerable in terms of burst healing potential, but I feel there are far more positives coming towards Discipline Priest than negatives. And you have to look at things like utility that Discipline Priest provide. Mass Dispel and Dispel Magic has seen some considerable playtime in Mythic Plus dungeons. Things like Last Boss on Underrot, Mass Dispel is extremely strong. This also has an easier way to deal damage. Now, this is something that I didn't mention previously. A lot of the healers relied on DPS legendaries in order to deal damage. Resto Druid relied on Feral Ring, relied on Balance Druid Shoulders, and they're not there anymore in BfA. So all of a sudden, Discipline Priest, they're the damage dealers. Damage is a big portion of what makes a healer strong in 5-man dungeons. Again, this is not my personal opinion. This is what the meta is like in Legion, and most likely is going to be in BfA. So all of a sudden, Discipline Priest has an easier way of dealing damage. They have specific talents that have emerged either from Legion or new talents that have been introduced in BfA that can kind of allow you to spec into more DPS builds, which can provide more DPS to the party, which can feel extremely strong. So all of a sudden you have this variety of different talent builds, variety of absorption, variety of damage prevention through talents like Lenience as well, which feels kind of strong in 5-man dungeons as well. So all of a sudden, this priest, they can provide very good healing on the move, strong damage absorption and damage reduction capabilities, strong utility, and easiest way of dealing damage in 5-man dungeons can make Discipline Priest a very strong contender to be one of the best healers for high Mythic Plus. Now, I feel that this feels extremely strong. We'll have to see about the damage patterns in Mythic Plus, but this is definitely a healer to look out for when looking for that best 5-man healer. So let's look at Mistweavers in 5-man dungeons. So Mistweavers is one of the healers in BfA that receives some core changes to their gameplay, and you can see that in 5-man dungeons. Soothing Mist is now a channeled ability that allows you to cast Vivify and Enveloping Mist on that target instantly, which means that you can have a potential for this single target or sustained burst healing. On top of that, Vivify also heals the targets with your Renewing Mist. Renewing Mist has 2 charges in the very recent Blizzard post. So all of a sudden your single target potential also translates to AoE healing, and it feels really fun in 5-man dungeons. You also have to consider that Renewing Mist is a smart hot and it's going to jump from the target when it reaches full HP. Now let's look at the survivability. So Fortifying Brew is the baseline cooldown that Mistweavers have. It's 1.5 minute cooldown, increases health and reduces damage. It's pretty good. You have Live Cocoon, 2 minute cooldown that adds absorption to the target and increases the healing that they receive. And also 75 talent row consists of a personal cooldown they can choose based on the mythic dungeon that you do. So all of a sudden you have 2 personal cooldowns, 1 external cooldown, and you have the ability to actually do Fist Weaving build with Rising Mist and Spirit of the Crane talents. Now, I'm not sure which build is going to be the strongest in 5-man dungeons, but there are possibilities for quite a few different builds for, sustained strong single target potential, for AoE healing potential, for that Fist Weaving potential as well. So it's interesting to have multiple different options. And you also have to consider that Monk and Priest is the only healing class in BfA that received party or raid buffs. So Mistweaver or Monk will provide you with Mystic Touch, increases physical damage taken by 5% for your party. And Priest will give you Power Word Fortitude, which increases the party stamina by 10%. These are substantial buffs, and these might be a consideration when deciding on which healer to bring to your high Mythic Plus dungeon. So you have to keep that in mind. But overall, Mistweavers are feeling like a pretty decent spec. They're definitely a climber spec from Legion. You have to look at things like they have an amazing mobility, especially that Resto Druid Displacer Beast has been removed. But Mistweavers have amazing mobility. They can heal on the move. They have a strong single target burst and AoE when needed, and a potential for Fist Weaving build that adds to your healing. So overall, I feel Mistweavers are doing pretty well and definitely climbing up the ladder. Now, Resto Shamans. Resto Shamans is one of the healers I'm not 100% sure about yet, because I'm not sure what healing gameplay is going to be involved in 5-man dungeons, whether Chain Heal or Healing Rain is going to make a comeback. Healing Rain was a legitimate choice in Legion because with tier 21 it became quite strong. I'm not sure if that's going to be the same in BfA. I'm not sure if Chain Heal is going to be the same, even though the talent choices have been kind of mixed up. But we have to look at the survivability of Resto Shaman. So first of all, the damage reduction from placing Healing Stream Totem is gone because that was an artifact trait. But an artifact trait, Ghost in the Mist, has been kind of redone and put into a talent, Spirit Wolf. While in Ghost form or while in the Ghost Wolf, you gain damage reduction, 5% damage reduction every 1 second, stacking up to 4 times. So overall, you can get 20% damage reduction if you stay in the Ghost Wolf form for long enough, which to some extent can somewhat feel like Druid Bear form, but the fact is that you have to spend some time in this Ghost Wolf form. You can't heal during that time, you have to let the damage reduction build up. It feels a bit more clunkier to use than a Bear form for Resto Druid, who just has to shift into it and that's it. But overall, it's still a big damage reduction. And you also have to look at the fact that Resto Shamans received a cheat death type of a talent through Nature's Guardian, which can be procced every 45 seconds. It's a talent, and if you feel that you're going to die or there's a possibility of you dying, you can spec into this and sacrifice that movement through Graceful Spirit as well. So there is some choices there. And on top of that, you also have the baseline Astral Shift. So there is survivability tools for Resto Shamans available there. But in terms of game style, it's very, very, very hard to say. In Legion, it was all about Riptide, Healing Surge, Healing Wave type of build, and your AoE healing came from casting Ascendance and letting your heal splash off to others. That was every 3 minutes. That was your healing potential. Like with tier 21, Healing Rain kinda came into the rotation, but the fact is your group had to stay in it. You had to coordinate. If you cast your Healing Rain somewhere else, he has a cooldown associated with it. If everyone moves out, it becomes awkward to place it, or at least you have to wait until to place it. Unlike Efflorescence for Resto Druid, which was basically very easy to use. Of course, it wasn't as strong as Healing Rain though. So it feels like Resto Shaman, or a lot of the Resto Shaman healing toolkit, is not utilized in 5-man dungeons. Like I said at the start, I'm not sure whether Chain Heal is going to make a comeback. I'm not sure whether Healing Rain is going to make a comeback. But either way, if they do make a comeback, they're still kind of relatively hard to use because everyone has to be stacked up, or at least everyone has to stack up at some certain point in order for Resto Shaman to utilize that AoE healing. Otherwise, you'll be stuck with a possible 5-man build with you using Echoes of the Elements, which have been moved to tier 30. All of a sudden you have 2 Riptides. You have to remember that Crashing Waves is no longer there, so having Riptides that will proc Tidal Waves is kind of important because those Tidal Waves can synergize with your Flash Floods talent, which will give you a more constant and more reliable way of, or at least getting faster heals. And faster heals, mana is not really a consideration in 5-man dungeons because you should be drinking every pull, so it's not that big of a deal to waste a bit more mana. Like I said, I'm still not completely sure about that best 5-man Resto Shaman build. It might still be that Riptide, Healing Wave, Healing Surge playstyle, but overall it feels like Resto Shamans have to try a bit harder in order to heal up the raid members, especially when relying on Ascendance to do that AoE burst. But the fact is, Resto Shamans have amazing utility. They're only healers with an Interrupt Dev Mass Stone. Tier 60 is filled with support talents, things like Ancestral Vigor, which can be extremely strong in 5-man dungeons. The fact is that Ancestral Vigor lost out in Mythic Plus in Legion because a lot of the affixes scaled off player HP in terms of percentages. If that's not going to happen in BfA, Ancestral Vigor could be legitimately a very strong support talent that's going to possibly save someone's life. So you have to consider that as well. So overall, I feel that Shamans have the utility. In terms of gameplay, I'm not sure what the gameplay is going to look like. If it's going to be Riptide, Healing Surge, Healing Wave with Flash Floods, Echoes of the Element kind of build. I feel that a lot of the Resto Shaman toolkit is not going to be utilized because of how Healing Rain and Chain Heal works. So it's going to make, or at least you're going to have to try harder to fully utilize your Resto Shaman, while other healers have it easier with their AoE abilities, who just randomly or are smart or going to jump straight away to targets regardless. So that's my consideration in terms of Resto Shaman healing in 5-man dungeons. Now, finally, let's look at Holy Priests. And Holy Priests have received relatively few changes in terms of their core abilities. The main changes came through talents, the loss of artifact, which saw Holy Priest losing a lot of passive abilities, which didn't really interfere with your gameplay that much, so there isn't that big of a loss anyways. The fact is that Renew might make a comeback because all of a sudden it lowers the cooldown of Holy Word Sanctify. Renew was not really that great of a spell in Legion, and one of the biggest downfalls of Holy Priest in Legion was that they lacked some kind of a defensive. They lacked externals, personal cooldowns. They also suffered a lot from heavy movement fights, and I don't feel that BfA, or at least BfA Holy Priest, really addresses those issues. I can see that Blizzard is trying to improve Holy Priest gameplay in 5-man dungeons, especially through the recent changes to Apotheosis, where you can see that Blizzard is trying to make them more viable, more fun. But the fact is, you still only have Desperate Prayer on 1.5 minute cooldown. You still only have Guardian Spirit on 3 minute cooldown. I know both of those spells can have their cooldowns reduced through specific talents, but you kind of sacrifice a lot in order to gain that. So all of a sudden, Holy Priests are looking like, at least in my eyes, they don't seem like they have the best survivability, but that might change. So overall, this video, I've covered all the healing classes. Again, this is a highly speculative video. Mythic Plus is not out yet. This is a ranking for people who are looking to do really high Mythic Plus dungeons. The fact is, I'm very, very confident that all of these healers will be able to achieve that, weekly Mythic Plus chest dungeons. So you don't have, if you're not looking to push really high-end mythics, you don't have to worry about this ranking. Play the healer that you like the most, because I'm very, very confident all of these healers are going to be fully capable of doing that baseline mythics. Now, the overall summary would be that Resto, Druids, Holy Paladins are still feeling extremely, extremely strong. Discipline Priests seem to have all the right toolkits, all the right utility, all the right DPS to become one of the best healers. We'll have to see though. Mistweaver is definitely a climber spec in BfA. And overall, Resto Shaman, I'm still not 100% sure. It just feels like Resto Shaman is going to be trying harder in order to catch up to the other healers, or at least a Resto Shaman group will have to coordinate a bit better, especially if Chain Heal and Healing Rain will become part of their rotation, which again is purely speculation. It could be just Riptide, Healing Surge, Healing Wave all over again. For me personally, I wasn't really enthusiastic about that game style. And Holy Priest is lacking a lot in terms of external cooldowns, in terms of personal cooldowns, and we'll have to see how the healing on the move is gonna go. But overall, I feel there's going to be a lot more variety for healers in terms of Mythic Plus keys. This video heavily relies on the fact that Blizzard is not going to scale dungeon damage. So the fact is that in Legion, Blizzard balanced Mythic Plus to only a certain level. And after that, they said, hey, you can do whatever level you want, but all of those bosses are going to do these one-shot mechanics. We don't care. We're not going to balance this. So if Blizzard is going to stick with this kind of mentality, meaning that the higher keys that you do, the crazier damage is going to happen, and it's going to be one-shots, this kind of ranking is highly dependent on the survivability, on the healer survivability, on a way to bring external cooldowns, on a way to DPS, on a way to provide constant AoE healing while, maintaining your DPS. So this might, if Blizzard decides to actually scale, to actually balance Mythic Plus dungeon damage, no matter what the key, this ranking will change completely. So keep that in mind while viewing this. I really want to know your opinions about this ranking. I really want to know your opinions about which healer you're going to go with. If you're playing Mythic Plus, if Mythic Plus is your passion, which healer you're going to stick with, and let me know. If you like the video, please do subscribe, like the video and things like that. It really, really helps out the channel. It helps me to keep making these videos. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in my next guide.